Welcome back to As For Me in My House, you guys. I'm Elena.
And I'm Jordan.
Today, we are going to give very practical tips on what you can do with your spouse after you have been in a argument, disagreement, a tickle, pickle, whatever you want to call it.
Ask us how we know.
We've had plenty of these. I vividly remember when Jordan mentioned this topic and started writing down the ideas that we had and the stuff that we have done over the years. I vividly remember, you guys, when Jordan and I first got married. It was probably a week into our marriage. It was when we came back from our honeymoon and we had an argument, and I was sitting on the couch at our old house. Remember that dark gray dingy couch that we had that the dogs just completely soiled? I was sitting on that couch, and I remember Jordan and I had just gotten into an argument, and I felt so conflicted because I did not genuinely know what to do. I knew I wanted to do the right thing. I knew I wanted to fight for a marriage. And I just had not been given the best example of what to do for conflict resolution. And so I literally Googled on my phone what to do after you and your spouse.
Seeking the wise sage counsel of the Google.
Which is not the wisest place yet, because then I had to discern and see okay, is this worldly advice? Is this biblical advice? So all that to say, I have been in these shoes. And so we want this to be very practical, whether you've been married for 5 minutes or 55 years. I hope that someone is able to leave with this episode and pull something out of it, because the enemy is after your marriage. Okay. Whether you realize it or not, whether you think you have a quote unquote godly marriage or not, he's after it and he wants to destroy it. And so how do marriages get destroyed? Several ways, but I think a root of a lot of it is not being able to communicate properly and not being able to resolve your issues properly or the conflict that you might have. And so this is the bread and butter of your marriage right here. And so if you're able to effectively communicate, if you're able, obviously there's so many great secrets and pieces to the pie of having a great marriage. But I think at the end of the day, being able to talk and communicate and effectively resolve things can be huge. And now we're preaching to the choir here, because Jordan was I was trying to piss you off before we came, so it'd be fresh in your mind. I'm you were doing a really good job. You did a good job. So sorry.
Yeah, that's essentially the heartbeat of this. We want to encourage you guys because we're walking in marriage. We know what it means to have conflict and struggle and fight and yell and scream and all these kinds of things that bring dishonor to our spouse. And I think our culture is makes a mockery of that. Our culture wants us to talk bad about our spouse to our boyfriends and girlfriends, literally or figuratively, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they want us to completely destroy it. Like Melena said, the devil is after our marriage. He hates that God has brought two people together into one. And he wants to destroy that because he knows that's how God designed for us to be, right? And to thrive in that and to walk in the way that God has outlined for us in Scripture. Yeah. So we're going to give you some encouragement. We're going to give you some practical stuff, and we want to walk you through a step-by-step, a process of, okay, next time, not if, but when, the next time you get in a fight with your spouse, try walking through some of these things and see if it doesn't help your situation. Again, this isn't a step-by-step. If it were, we'd be millionaires. We can't write a book on how to resolve all conflict in every scenario, but we do. We have seen the fruit of some of these practical things that we've implemented at work in our lives and benefiting us. So we just want to pass those on to you. And so let's jump into it, honey. What did you bring with you today?
I actually brought something that is for my children, but I find that I grab this more for myself than I do for my kids. This is Wise Words for Moms, and it was written by Ginger Hubbard. I have some of her books. I really like the stuff that she does and promotes. Not all of it, though. If you've read any of her stuff, you know.
Sure. Not everyone's going to agree on 100% of everything when it comes to parenting, but a lot of great information and wisdom she has. So
yes. So she has this chart. We'll link it down below. It's called Wise Words for Moms. And she basically has, this stays in our fridge if you're listening or just listening. I'm holding it up, but it's a pamphlet, and it has 2 different pages, and it has a child's behavior on one side, and then it has the heart probing. So a question that you would ask your child if they're responding in a specific way. Then the reproof. So whatever they're doing and the verse that correlates and corrects what they're doing, and then the encouragement, and then additional verses. So I think this is great because
it's pretty chock full. Hold it up here real quick so people can see it on. If you're watching, this is,
and we'll link it down below. It's like $5. I would literally pay $500 for this. Like, this is gold to me. I've been looking for something like this for years.
Well, when your mom was over, she said, "Why? Where was this when I was bringing up my kids?" And it's like, there's so many great resources available now that we just have to like grab them, grab hold of them, and it'll help. But this has been something that not only has helped us as parents or Malena as a mom, but even us in our marriage as husband and wife, there's a lot of overlap and a lot of things that we can glean from this. And I think you got some examples of that.
Yeah. So so this is for children, obviously. So a lot of the like children behavior, like geared towards children, but I feel like a lot of this can be applied to adults too. So
when we're acting like grown children.
Yeah. Okay, stirring up strife or picking on one another. Obviously, like maybe the picking on one another, but maybe like stirring up strife. So the heart-probing question is, are you proposing in your heart to promote peace, or are you stirring up trouble? How can you show love and persuade peace in the situation? And then one of the 7 things God hates is one who stirs up trouble among his brothers. Proverbs 6:19.
That's convicting for me because I'm like, my default is not always, Lord, how can I be at peace with my wife? And God forgive me for that, because a lot of times it's, I had a hard day. I deserve this. I'm entitled to that. Why isn't she fulfilling that need of mine? Then I go and attack her. And that's when the fighting, and like, here we go. It's let's get ready to rumble, And so that's where I think the conviction comes in for me is, no, I need to be not only seeking peace with my wife, but promoting a peaceful household as your husband and father of our kids.
And then the peacemaking, so the encouragement of that is God gives joy in those who promote peace. Proverbs 12:20. Trying to find a different one that might. Okay, this one's funny. She also has a chart where it talks about the offended and then the offender. So like, this is more if like your children are fighting, but if you and your spouse are fighting, the offended, did you talk to so-and-so about it before coming to me? Did you respond in the way that God would have wanted you to respond? Are you willing to forgive the way that Jesus forgives? And then the verse is, do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult, but with blessing. 1 Peter 3:9. If your brother sins against you, go and show him his fault just between the two of you. You may have only come to me if you confide in your brother and sister first, and they will not listen. So I love this because this is one thing I did want to chat, because sometimes I feel like some people might be at a point in their marriage where they have tried to resolve things on their own and it's just become difficult. And that's what Matthew 18 talks about, that if you two have tried and it has not worked out, to seek out wise counsel. And so if you feel like you're in that position too, definitely seek out a church or a resource or a pastor, someone near you, to help and assist that. There is no shame in that. I think like going to a marriage conference is for your marriage when it's thriving or not thriving. Like, don't wait until you're at the point where you feel like you are just going to kill each other because you just can't stand to look at the other person. Like, don't let it get to that point. Yeah. So there's tons of other ones. Maybe do one more.
To your point though, just before you move on.
Wait, this one is great. Sorry. This one is so good because I think sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say one last thing to your last point before you move on is when you're talking about going to somebody, whether that's like a pastor, an elder, a counselor, somebody who you can bring this to in confidence and they will seek to help you.
Yeah.
How often is it that we go to the wrong people, like maybe our friends or coworker even, or even our parents, right? Like there were times, not in our marriage, but that we've been by proxy others in our family or others close to us where, they would essentially get in a fight with their spouse and then they would go to their parents to like tell on their spouse. And
there's a thing over here about tattling. Do you want me to do that one?
Well, that kind of goes along with it. But the last thing I'll say before and then you take over. But I was thinking of something my mentor said was there was a time when the family that they knew, the wife was feeling very, upset and dejected and not at peace with her husband. And she basically called her mom and said, Mom, I'm coming home. I can't do this anymore. I'm fed up. I'm done with this. And her dad was on the phone too, but her mom said, "You are home, figure it out with your husband," and hung up. And I was like, oh, snap. And that's so true. Like, imagine how hard that is to do as a parent, especially when you start getting into these, like, you know, in-laws involved and different sides of the family.
Get real messy real quick.
Yeah, especially when your spouse is caught in the crossfire of that, when it's like, you know, you with their parents or them with your parents. So that gets very messy. And so you always want to seek to build that together. But I thought, man, that must be hard for a parent, especially when they're thinking like, that's still my little daughter or my girl. And they're coming to me, and it's like, no, they understood what was best for their child, even in that situation as a grown adult child, is no, you need to work through this together. This is, you made a covenant before God. You're one, you are home, you figure it out, you know, like not to be cold or like dismissive or say like not validate, but they were really, that was the most loving thing that they could do. So
yes, I was just pulling up Titus 2 because who you should be looking for is a Titus 2 woman who is going to teach you and show you how to love your children and love your husband. Like if someone is not, if you don't think of that person and don't see that that's what they're trying to do with other women, that you should not be going to them for advice. Like if they're trying to get you to speak badly about your spouse, or if they're trying to get you to gossip, like that's not who you should be going to. But
yeah, check out Titus 2 and spend some time studying that, because
it's short. It's like what, three chapters?
Yeah, it's a short book, but really rich.
So this next little point, this last one, the column is the behavior is selfishness. I think for a lot of times, the root of a lot of it is being selfish. And in marriage, you are to die to your flesh. Like you are to seek to serve the other above yourself at all times. Like that's what it means to die to yourself. And I feel like that applies to everything that is the Christian walk. You know, it's like not doing what your flesh wants to do, because my flesh does not want to serve Jordan. My flesh does not want to submit to Jordan. My flesh wants to do what I want to do, which is not what the Bible is calling me to do. Like my flesh wants to do all the wrong things. And so I love this selfish question. Are you putting your spouse ahead of yourself, or are you being selfish? What would be a kind and generous thing to do? Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider one another, consider others better than yourself. Philippians 2:3. Do not withhold good for those who deserve it when it is in your power to act. Proverbs 3:27. Honor one another above yourselves. Romans 12:10. And then God loves a cheerful giver. 2 Corinthians 9:7b. It's simple, you know, like ask yourself, are you putting who ahead of your, like,
I'm going to talk to the ladies here for a second. I have seen and felt a very stark reality when Milena is seeking to be selfless and to honor me as her husband. And I don't acknowledge her enough for that. So it's one thing to recognize it and to realize it's happening. It's another to then go and honor her, or to recognize her, or to tell her I appreciate that. And so I think that goes just miles far as in the grand scheme of helping to diffuse fighting or conflict in your relationship, when that's the default, like Melania said, when that's what you're doing initially. Like I've felt that, I've experienced that, where like, okay, Melena's doing this right now, you know, like it's not a fake, it's not an act, it's her making an intentional, conscious decision to want to serve me, or to want to be selfless and doing things for me. So pray and ask the Lord what that might look like in your life. And I guarantee you'll see a lot less conflict when you're doing that with your spouse. Doesn't matter who's initiating it. It's that someone's doing it and the other one is then volleying that back, and then it comes back and forth, just like volleyball. You know, you're passing it back and forth, and before you know it, you guys are smitten again. You know, and so that's really cool. Something I want to definitely highlight.
Yes.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about the process
steps.
Like we got 5 or 6 kind of like step by step to walk you through. Okay, you just had a fight. What do you do? Like, what's the next thing you do right now?
Yeah.
Before you take to to take to Twitter. Is that still a thing? I don't know. But like before you start just venting and indirect tweeting, here's some things that we've been able to work through. And again, I've seen the fruit of this in our lives. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break.
We'd like to thank KiwiCo for sponsoring this portion of today's podcast. KiwiCo is defining the future by play by making it engaging, enriching, and seriously fun. They create super cool hands-on projects designed to create a lifelong love for learning among kids. KiwiCo gets delivered to your front door every single month with different projects for your kids to do. The subscription line is for infants, preschoolers, teens, and beyond. All of our kids get KiwiCo boxes. It's probably their highlight of the day. Whenever we get a box, each has their own. I always get questions and the kids are like, which one's mine? What's the project we're going to do? And they will just have so much fun. It's a project that I love to do with Alethea during quiet time. Ari loves to do it in the morning. And then Evangeline has her box that she plays with all the toys that are in there for her age. It's super cool, hands-on science and art and geography projects that are delivered right to your door with real engineering and high quality materials. And there's something for kids of all ages. There's no commitment, so you can pause or cancel at any time. And as a parent, it's really great because you don't have to think about different activities. You don't have to go out and get the supplies, and you don't have to go out and like get all these things, because that can be really tedious sometimes. And I always tend to forget that one really special ingredient and the one really special craft, and then I have to go back out. And like, you know how it is going out with kids. You don't want to have to do it more than 2 times. And so that is really nice. It also comes with like a little pamphlet and a magazine that gives you different options and different ways to do the project. Or like Evangeline's will have different things that we can do with all the different play things that came in her box. And so it's really great and geared towards your child, but it's also really great as a parent because then it just makes our life a little bit easier. It also encourages your kids to be innovative and creative thinkers, and you can watch your confidence grows as they start to figure out these projects. So redefine learning with play. Explore hands-on projects that build creative confidence and problem-solving skills with KiwiCo. Get 50% off your first month plus free shipping on any crate line at kiwico.com/asforme. That's 50% off your first month at kiwico.com/asforme.
We also want to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode, and especially when we're talking about things like fights and arguments with your spouse. One of the best things you can do, like we mentioned earlier in the episode, is to have a licensed professional counselor or therapist sit with you and your spouse, walk with you guys through whatever problems you're facing. And the beauty of BetterHelp is that it's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So if you and your spouse both work during the day and you have time in the evening that you want to connect with your therapist, you can schedule that. And sometimes going in person is kind of daunting when you're literally sitting there face to face. Whereas when you do something like this online, it's a little less intimidating and you oftentimes get a much better result. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/myhouse today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/myhouse.
We'd also like to thank EarthBreeze for sponsoring this podcast. There's something you might have never thought about, and that is, why does laundry detergent come in these massive plastic jugs? They are awkward, heavy, unconventional, and filled with messy goop that is 99% water. And machine washers already use water, so why do we have to pay more for it? Not only that, but then 90% of those jugs won't get recycled. And so we have switched to EarthBreeze detergent. They're like little eco sheets that look like dryer sheets, but they're not. They dissolve in 100%. Any wash cycle, hot or cold, and it couldn't be easier. There's no measuring, no mess. You just toss it in. Sometimes we use one, sometimes we use half of one, sometimes we use 2. Depends on the size of the load, but it like feels very weird the first couple of times because you're like, oh, why was that so easy? Like, why did I not have to measure this thing out? It's really nice, okay? And EarthBreeze has made the whole concept of doing detergent and laundry so much better. The packaging is compost, biodegradable, and plastic free. They're also vegan and cruelty-free, and they're dermatologist tested. So they're safe for sensitive skin. We get the unscented ones. You guys know I'm like very sensitive to smell. And so the unscented ones make our laundry clean, get the stains out, but it doesn't have like this really strong fragrance. It's just clean. And I really enjoy that. So they also have a buy one, give 10 initiative. So each purchase donates 10 loads of detergent to a charitable cause of your choice. And a whopping 30 million loads have already been donated. These little sheets have turned a chore into an act of kindness. And most importantly, you still get clean clothes. I'm telling you this, you won't really know it until you try it. And if you don't like it, Earth Breeze will give you a full refund. You don't even have to send it back. They're that confident you'll love it that much. Now, it's time to try Earth Breeze because right now my listeners can subscribe and save 40% off. Go to earthbreeze.com/myhouse to get started. That's earthbreeze.com/myhouse for 40% off. earthbreeze.com/myhouse.
So, do you want to start off, honey?
Yeah, I'll start. All right. Don't wait for the other person to initiate the apologies. And we pulled this out of Romans 12:10.
What you just read a second ago.
Yes.
To outdo one another in honor. And that goes with this idea of, like, even if you don't feel like you were wronged, or even if you don't feel like you were in the wrong, you could still apologize because it's not always our feelings or our perspective. It's how somebody else might have taken something. So if you didn't mean it that way, don't wait for the other person to initiate the apology because they're thinking in their mind, I'm not apologizing till they do. The other person's thinking, I'm not apologizing till they do. And then before you know it, you have this rift.
So silly.
Like Mariana's Trench between your marriage.
I don't get the reference.
That's the deepest underwater trench in the Atlantic. Sorry, guys. It's uncalled for. Apologize.
A huge thing that we learned from pre-marriage class was I feel statements. So if you guys aren't familiar with these, I highly, highly, highly encourage this like little shift in your wording instead of like putting blame on the other person. So words like never, always, like avoid those. I've noticed a huge difference when I avoid them because I know like Jordan would be like, no, I've done it at least once, or like he'll like throw it back at me. I'm like, okay. So I found that was just like, the conversation doesn't get anywhere and it's just not helpful. You
lose credibility with the other person when you use never and always statements. For example, if you say, you never clean up after yourself. Whoever's, even if it's 99% of the time, it's still not 100% of the time. And when you communicate that towards the other person, in their mind, they're thinking, well, I'm not recognized because I have done that. So they're denying reality, or they're thinking that's not even true. So what's the point of even trying to communicate with them further when they're already starting off on a faulty premise, So that when you use those always and never type of words, it's hard to actually be to have your message received, if that makes sense. But
so the I feel statements are you explaining how you're feeling, because one person might do something with the intention of good or with the intention of like it being a positive thing, but it's not received that way. So instead of putting the blame on them and like throwing the cards back at them, the I feelings make it point to you. And so the person that's receiving that isn't in like a combative state of being like, I need to defend myself. It's not about them. It's more on you. So a great example was an argument we had yesterday.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you wanted to go through everything, and then we apply it to a real life argument we had yesterday.
Yeah.
Let everyone in on the tea.
Okay, we'll go through all of them and then we'll share the argument we had yesterday.
That sounds good.
Okay, so next one is to admit fault, aka confess, and we pulled that from James 5:16. To confess your sins to one another
and pray for each other that you might be healed.
Yes.
Because when you confess, there's power in admitting and humbling yourself before one another and ultimately before God to say, I was wrong. I should not have done this. And I'm admitting my fault before you. You're very vulnerable and you're naked before your spouse. And that's, I think, has so many different applications. Obviously, physical nakedness, right? Like Adam and Eve were naked in the garden.
You guys should go watch our 1+1 episode that we did a couple weeks ago. That we kind of highlight a lot of this.
That's a little clap back to that, but that there's also a nakedness of your emotions, and especially as men, we're very like guarded and clothed emotionally at times because we don't want to show. We feel like it's a a
stems
weakness.
from pride.
Yeah, we think it's like you're showing a weakness if you show your emotions for
if
some
you didn't
reason.
think you're prideful, once you get married, you realize how prideful you really are.
Yes, I did.
I did too, though. Because I remember it was really hard for me to say sorry in the beginning. Like, I would refuse to apologize. I would go days. And when I did, I'd be like, I don't really mean it. I was wronged. I was not in the wrong.
Right.
It was very prideful.
After you admit your fault and confess, then you want to share your heart honestly. Proverbs 24:26 says, the truth is like a kiss on the lips. And you could actually literally kiss your spouse on the lips after that. It's just, it works. But yeah, really though, when you're sharing your heart, you're putting out how you've taken things, how you've received things, and how your spouse has maybe missed that. So again, like Milena said at the beginning, that communication factor is so important. And when you're sharing your heart and listening to the other person share their heart, you have that much deeper connection and that much deeper communication built.
And intimacy too.
100%.
Now, if you have kids, the next step is to let your children see you make up.
And maybe make out.
I wouldn't make out in front of
Make up and make out. No. It just sounds good. No, I think, yeah, maybe exercise discretion on that one. But
I would not do that in front of the kids. But the make up part, yes. I think it's super important as parents to show your kids what a biblical marriage can look like and what it even means to work together through things and how it means to resolve conflict. Like it means the world to your children to know that their parents love each other. There's a recent study that showed that the most important relationship for a child is not the mother-child bond, it's not the father-child bond, but it's actually the bond between their parents. Which when I heard that study, I'll link it below. I was like, I'm sorry, what? So it's not, it has nothing to do with the child. It was insane. The relationship between the mom and the dad is the most important relationship to them. And it's not even directly them. Because
you can't fake that. It's like, I can't stand the old adage, do as I say, not as I do. Like, that's the most hypocritical saying. And I say that jokingly, but like, that is when people used to say that back in the day. It's like, oh my goodness, why would I believe what you say when you're not doing what you say you're doing, you know, what you're telling me to do.
Yeah. So if we want our kids to work on apologizing, Jordan and I need to work on apologizing. If we want our kids to work on their feelings, Jordan and I have to work on their feelings. Like they need that constant modeling and that constant example of what that can look like and practically looks like
It's basically a 4-way relationship there. So imagine for a moment, if you will, we'll use our family for the sake of the example, a mother and a father, right? Mom and dad. Then you have a daughter and a son. So you have man, woman, boy, girl. Now, let's take Alethea, right? Our daughter. When she's seeing Milan and I interact, she's looking not only at how she ought to be as a mom and as a grown woman one day, but then also what she ought to be looking for in a potential partner, spouse, husband one day. And Milan and I get to be that model. We get to be that representation to her.
Which can be really scary and really convicting because how I treat Jordan now, how I talk to Jordan is most likely how she will as well and will be what she looks for or how she responds. And the also scarier thing is like how Jordan treats me is how she's going to think she needs to be treated or not treated. Right. And so
it's
if
less
that doesn't
to do with
convict you, I don't know what will.
Because imagine we both came from our parents are together. They're not divorced, but I'd imagine for those of you listening who come from a divorced family, like how much of that affected you, and maybe it's to varying degrees, right? I can't speak for everybody listening, but I got to imagine that they're at some level, at some time at least, maybe not forever, but at one point in that whole process, there's a sense of guilt felt by the children, even though the parents are sure constantly over and over, no, it's not you, sweetie. No, it's not you, son. It's mommy and daddy, you know, like we're like, but that still like has such an impact on the entire family structure, right? I think that's why it has such deep-seated ramifications. And so to your point, I think that model of that family relationship between me and you for our kids, and the same thing I was going to say with Ari, he's looking at it from the other perspective. He's looking at me at what he should be, and he's looking at Mullane at what he should find in a woman or in a wife. So I'm like, wow, that's a pretty heavy weight, and by God's grace, he'll carry it with us,
Yeah.
And so that's something I think letting your children see, instead of just going from having a screaming match to then the next morning you're walking downstairs hugging each other. Hey, mom and dad are great. They're kind of like, wait, did we miss something? Go back a couple chapters, like what happened? I think that for them is going to be key to then not only seeing the fight and the resolution, but the actual process of making amends in the middle of all that. So that helps them to figure out how I ought to do this with my future spouse.
Yeah. And use discretion here. Obviously, if you guys are fighting over porn or something, like you don't really want to have that conversation in front of your kids.
Sure. But, yeah. It's everything's scalable to a level of appropriateness.
Yeah.
But certainly if it's, you have that intuition as a parent and that decision-making capability. So just an advice thing, just a tip we want to share with you that's worked for us.
Next one is probably the most difficult one for a lot of people, and that is to pray together. We got that from Mark 11:25. This is a thing that I think was really hard for us in the beginning of our marriage because it feels really weird. Not as much anymore, but I think in the beginking for me it was difficult.
It was never weird for me. I could tell you had some reservations though about praying, like letting me into your time with the Lord.
It's valid. I feel like it for my whole life it had been an intimate thing between like the Lord and I, so it felt harder to have you like in on that, which it shouldn't. But in case that's something that you've struggled with, like I have been there too, and so. Yeah, I did a day in the life with Jesus. So if you guys want to check that out, we'll link it down below. But I share how Jordan and I prayed together at the end of the night and what that looks like. And I kind of share more on my struggle with that and how I like kind of overcame that. So I'll link that down below because I don't want to keep repeating myself. But
Mark 11:25, just in case people want to hear the verse too. It's to pray and forgive one another, so that your heavenly Father will forgive you as well. And that idea there is, it's again hypocritical of us to think we ought to be forgiven by God when we're still harboring unforgiveness in our heart towards others. And so that's again something that sobers me to say, Lord, just like you've forgiven me and continue to forgive me over and over in my daily struggle, that should be my posture in my heart towards my spouse too. And so just as we are praying together with each other, for each other, confessing our sins, all these different things, right? Now we're coming together. And again, I'm not talking weeks later or even a day later. I'm talking maybe minutes, an hour tops later, you should be praying together. Like, I think it's Ephesians 4:26 says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. Like, do not go to bed angry with your spouse. Do not, if there's something that needs to be resolved, resolve it before you lay your head down on your pillow. It'll just be so much better that way. You'll save so much heartache and so much trouble and so much frustration. Honey, what's the last thing in the process?
Before I do the last one, I just want to give a little bit of advice to anyone who kind of struggles with putting their thoughts together or tends to get easily angered and has a hard time either controlling their tongue or just like controlling themselves. Because I think depending on how you grew up and how you saw resolution conflict resolved, that may have been someone throwing a shoe across the room at someone else's head, So like, if that's what you're used to, that's most likely what you will try to do. And so a lot of us might still be in the process of unlearning what we learned growing up or what we thought is how you resolve things.
What's that in Portuguese? What's it called? With the
Mapeb, chinelo.
Chinelo?
What?
Is that what it is? Like when you hit someone in the head with a shoe after, like when you're fighting them? Yeah. That's the most Brazilian thing I've ever heard.
Oh, yeah. So, depending on what that looks like, if you're someone that struggles with even, because sometimes Jordan will be like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't even know. But if I get like 5 minutes to myself and I'm like actually able to compose myself, I will go and like either physically write something down or just write something on my notes. And I literally will just bullet point things. So I'm like incohesive and makes sense because I tend to be more emotional and like start to not, like, I feel like I'm invalidating myself because I'm not making sense of what I'm saying. So if I take an extra 5 minutes to be like, okay, truly, what is it that actually annoyed me? And we'll kind of walk through this in a second when we shared the little fight we had yesterday. But last point is to have sex. You're welcome.
No Bible verse for this one, but do you really need one? Like, no, it's one of those things where, again, we say it a little bit tongue in cheek, but
it's very unifying.
Coming together with your spouse sexually after a fight is healing. It is. Like, I'm not even making fun of it. Like, there's a reason why God gave that gift to couples, because you're sharing this experience with the one person that you're bonded to in a covenant marriage. And so they're seeing all of your faults and all of your good things and everything about you, and you get to have this physical union together too. And so doing that act together after a fight helps to bring you all the much more closer together, literally and figuratively speaking.
And then I would say for us, literally 10 out of 10 times after, we start laughing because we're like, that was so stupid. Like, what was that even about? You know,
we're like, we don't have to get into a fight to be intimate, you know? Like, let's just skip the whole fight part.
That too. I have heard people like will have sex before they walk through an argument to kind of like simmer things down a little bit, or I guess simmer things up and then simmer back down. Anyway, all right, let's get into the example and kind of apply these steps into an argument that Jordan and I had.
So let me set this up.
Oh, no, I should set
no. Allow me, please. Let me be a gentleman. No, so I was doing some work. I was out of the house.
I want to hear into your brain. Well, okay. I kind of already did, but I think it's just funny.
So I had a lot of just like tasks to do, little things that just required.
How many emails did you have to answer?
I had like 60 emails I went through in a matter of 2 hours. And it wasn't just like read it. It was like, okay, I had to find this piece of information, put it over here, reformat it. Like, it was a lot of just like tedious work that I had to be very concentrated on. So I'm like doing this, it's getting late in the day, and I text Milena. Originally when I left, I said, hey, I'll be home about 5. And if you know anything about me, that word "about" is oh so crucial, because there's a lot of, like, for me, if I'm in the zone on something, I'm just going to work through and get it done. I'm not the kind of person that, like, I'm not enslaved to the clock where it says, oh, well, it's quitting time, better go. It's like, no, if I'm in something, I'm going to do it and I'm going to finish it and see it through and be all in. Then I'll deal with Milena when I get home.
I'm very punctual. He's not.
Yes.
Like,
I like to focus. I'm very project or task or event oriented.
And I'm very like time. So like if I have to be there at 5, I'm showing up at 4:58.
Right. I mean, if it's an event or something where it's like a formal thing.
Even then.
You're late. No, I'm not. No. But if it's like,
we just had a meeting we went to yesterday, we were 30 minutes late.
Well, I couldn't help that every route was closed for construction, because in Michigan there's 2 seasons. There's winter and construction. We're in construction and winter, ironically. So we're getting them both at the same time. But anyways, I digress. So I told Milena I was going to be home about 5. I'm getting these emails done. I'm like, man, this is taking forever. This is more than I thought. I really need to get these done. I've been procrastinating on them for too long. I'm just going to go through, like, hammer them out. So I do all the emails and I look at the clock. It's 5:30. And in my mind, I'm thinking, half hour, not too bad. That's actually a personal record. No, but then I'm like, okay, I'm still 15 minutes from home. So I'm just going to get home as soon as I can. And when I'm like 5 minutes away from home, Milena texts me, honey, your dinner's cold, with like the crying smile, like this, like the cry smiling face.
So can I explain my point of view now? So in my head, Jordan
So what were you doing during this time?
So during this time, I had started dinner like literally an hour and a half prior. So he said he was going to be there at 5. So I'm like, okay.
About 5.
The kids, everyone was awake. Not everyone napped. And so I had all 3 trying to make dinner and they wanted to help me. And so I make ample time for that. So I had started around like 3:30ish, maybe more towards like 4. But I had like kind of backtracked for dinner to be ready at 5, because I feel like it's really sweet to walk home into like a nice frequent home and like a nice hot meal.
Feeling.
And so when it was 5 and the kids were all really hungry, we still go through witching hours sometimes. And so everyone was really hungry. Evangeline really wanted to go to bed already. Like, it was kind of like, when everyone's just hungry. So you're like, okay, I'm trying to just hurry up and get this done.
No, not at all.
So I'm just trying to hurry up and get it done. But then when I realized the time already, I was like, oh, well, this sucks. Like, we want to have dinner together. And like, I love when we all have dinner together. I feel like that is just like my love language at the end of the day, all of us sitting down and just having a meal together. Normally Jordan will share like a Bible story and he's really animated with it. And it's actually funny. Ari was like, no candles tonight. Like,
yeah.
I'll normally do a candlelit dinner, but he was like, no candles.
Let's not
today.
risk burning down our house for one day this week.
I was like, okay, that's fine. And so all the kids, I like made I made steak yesterday. And they would not stop eating fast. They were eating so fast. I could not cut it fast enough. So I also wanted you to get home so you could cut the steak because my arm was really hurting. Yeah. Like, it was a really meaty steak and like really fatty and the knife was not working that well. So like my whole, not to be dramatic, but I was cutting meat not fast enough for them. So I was like, oh, I really wish Jordan was home
task.
so he could. You have muscles for a reason, okay? So
no, I
just wanted him to come home. I wanted him to smell the house. Like, I cooked steak. He loves steak. So I was just like excited for him to be home.
And I was excited to get home.
Right. But
I was like, I didn't want to be thinking, oh man, I still got 12 emails I got to go through or 12 people I need to get back. I didn't want to have that like in the back of my head while I'm trying to sit down and enjoy everything Melena's
this
describing.
all might sound kind of silly as we're explaining it. But at the moment, I was like genuinely upset.
No, we've had fights over less.
Yeah, or more. But when he came home, I was like upset. The kids had already left the table. It had already been like almost an hour since we had been sitting down. I tried to keep them at the table as long as possible so we could all eat together, but it was just not happening. The kids were ready for baths. Like, the time had already kind of passed. And so when he came home, I was like, what did I say? I said, I feel...
You said, why didn't you tell me? She's like, just communicate with me.
Yeah.
Keep me updated. You didn't update me. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm just in the zone. Like, yeah, it wouldn't have hurt to stop for 12 seconds to send Melena a text and say, hey, sorry, I'm finishing up. It's taking me a little longer, whatever. And so I failed to like communicate with her. That was already the first problem.
But I used an I feel statement, but I can't remember what I said. I think I've said I feel hurt. Is that what I said?
Sounds about right. Yeah.
So, and when you use those types of statements again, it makes him not like feel all like he needs to defend himself. It's more so me showing him his actions. Sure, it might not have been that big of a deal, and maybe it wasn't that big of a deal.
That's the impact how they've had on her.
Yes, because then I was like, well, I feel hurt when you don't communicate with me, or like that you didn't show up for dinner because dinner's important to me, and da 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 da. You know, like I feel like
sorry, honey, for not.
Are we gonna make out?
Well, we can't do all of these on camera, clearly, but yeah, we'll go through like the G rating version. So this is literally how it went, and this is why we're taking some of these the process of how we've worked through these things before. So Melena shared with me her heart, and how she was hurt by that, and that's when I, again, not doing one of these, patting myself on the back, but I thought, you know what, and too many times I've taken the defensive route and tried to put it back on her, and it never works well. Let me just try apologizing right off the bat, like first thing.
Did. Yeah.
I said, I'm sorry. I should have communicated with you. I wanted to eat. This looks great. I wanted to eat with you guys. This looks great. It smells great. And I could tell like Melena's wall came down a little bit, but she was still hurt by it. And so I said I should not have, like, I was again continuing on like admitting fault and confessing like I shouldn't have stayed so long. I should have came home when I said I was going to be home.
Or just said that you were going to be late. Like, it's not that big of a deal.
But I didn't want to. You know, like, that's the thing, is my desire wasn't to like completely ignore and discount all that you did and all you wanted. So
right. I think one thing that's also super helpful, because
now we're sharing our heart.
When you followed that up, I was like, well, what can you do different next time? Because I do this to my kids, but I also do this with us. Like, when we apologize what we did, and
I
what
really
can
appreciate
we do,
when she talks to me like
what we can do different, you know? Because it's like, there's no sense, kind of like when the Bible talks about teaching your kids and instructing them, like, there's no point of telling them what they did wrong if you're not going to tell them what to do that is right.
Yep.
And so I feel like it's kind of like just kind of making the person think And it's not to dumb it down. It's just true. Like I do that to myself too. It's like, okay, what can I do different next time to like not let this happen again? And it was really easy. Just communicate and just let me know ahead of time.
And then we did have maybe a 5 or 10 minute period of like, it's a little tense.
Where I was like mad cleaning.
Melena's still simmering.
I was cleaning and like, I don't know if you guys have ever like,
I was like,
aggressively clean.
I thought,
like
and
cleaning
then
the pots and the pans.
At that point, again, this isn't like one after another, like right back to back, but there is like kind of a formula, like a rhythm that you can follow. Yeah. So at this point, after I admitted fault and we're sharing our heart about it a little bit, I'm like,
kinda
okay,
sat on it for a second.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, this would probably, I put on my thinking cap and I thought this would probably be a good time for me to go get the kids bathed and down for bed. And so I did just that. I ate and did that, and now it was about 7:30, and came down. I said something clever or something kind of joking just to like let her know, I want to diffuse the situation. I can't remember, but I said something, and then
we made out.
We laughed and started making out, and then I honestly don't know if we did pray together.
I don't think we did, but
we should have, because that would have only helped it more. And then you could probably guess what happened later that night. Just take a shot in the dark there. But yeah, all that to say, we've seen a process, and again, we're not perfect at this, and we're still learning how to implement it. But this has worked for us. This has been something like, if you do these steps, it'll work. Like it
diffuses,
be better than not,
and it becomes easier and easier the more you do it. Like,
yes,
I remember saying sorry in the beginning of our marriage was like eating a
brick.
No, a pile of crap. Like, it was like eating a pile of dog crap. Like, it was hard for me to do it. Like, I did not want to do it. Like, there were way other things I wanted to do other than apologize. And now it's like become something that's so natural and so easy, and it's a genuine apology.
I have noticed that too, that you've really, and I as well, like I don't remember saying really sorry and apologizing sincerely to each other early in our marriage, which I think is good and bad, because it's bad that we didn't, but it's good that we're like changing that now.
Yeah. I feel like we should actually do an episode of like reflecting back on our first couple years of marriage or something. Because back then I truly did not know what it meant to be married.
We're just now starting to figure out like, what does this thing look like almost 6 years later? But I wanted to just close in an analogy, and from my previous training and experience in, the military law enforcement career, kind of that world, you have this training that you normally go through that's like treating like casualties, or somebody maybe suffering a gunshot wound or something like that. It's the idea here is stop the bleed is the terminology used. So you're trying to stop this person from bleeding out, because if they bleed out, they'll die. And imagine you get a major artery cut. You only have sometimes seconds, a minute maybe, to get that bleeding stopped and to put pressure or tourniquet or whatever it might be to actually treat that. So you're triaging this. You're going through looking, okay, how do I stop this from happening? And the quicker you act and the quicker you get that situation taken care of, the higher the chance of survivability goes up. The longer you wait, the lower chance of survivability there is. And so if you think of it in the terms of what we've talked about here in our fighting and conflict with your spouse, the quicker you are to forgive, the easier it is to heal and move on. And so just like an arterial bleed, the more time that goes on without care, the less chance of surviving you have. Similarly, the longer that you harbor hatred and resentment and unforgiveness in your heart, the more difficult it is to repair and heal something that might have been easily remedied days, weeks, months, years, decades previously. And again, with Melena and I coming up on 6 years of marriage, we're not 60 years into marriage, but we have lived enough life together to know this is something where, yes, there are marriages and there are people who have, to go with the analogy for a second, bled out, quote unquote, and have been like, this is done. And I wonder, it's caused me to wonder what would have happened if they acted sooner. What would happen if they put that proverbial tourniquet on their marriage first or quicker, would that have been able to save that? And so
I would love to have a couple on who was like on the verge of divorce and didn't go through with it. I feel like we should interview a couple.
Yeah, that'd be great. If you guys know anyone,
I'd love to
let us know down below. Or even, maybe even better yet, somebody who did go through with it and
then got back together.
Then sought reconciliation through Christ.
Love a redemption story.
That we do. But yeah, let us know what you guys thought of this. Leave a comment down below of different things that you've seen working your marriage as far as what to do after a fight and how you've remedied that solution, remedy that situation. And yeah, let us know. And we'll talk to you then.
Go make out with your spouse. Bye, guys.